So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Sunday morning talk. And I'd like to begin with a little something autobiographical. That when I was in my 20s, I was living at a Zen monastery, Tassajara Monastery here in California, for about 3 years. And I had recently graduated from college and had been accepted to graduate school, which I then deferred. And I was living at the monastery, living a monastic life. And I spent a lot of time reflecting, thinking about what was I going to do with my life? Go to graduate school, do something else? What should I do? And I was happily engaged in the monastic life and 4 days of the week. They had a 5-day week cycle. So I was following the monastic routines for 4 days, and then the 5th day was kind of half day off or something. And so I would go and hiking in the mountains there. And those days off were the hardest days for me because I was left with myself in a different way, and I had to reflect on my concern about what I was going to do with my life. I had to make a decision. So I did a lot of reflecting on those walks. And after about a year of these kinds of walks and reflections and thinking what to do, and I think it was beginning to be kind of, maybe I'd done enough reflection, thinking about it, with no answers. And at some point I realized that I was operating in some generalizations, in imaginations, imagining a future, imagining things that were beyond the monastery, about what I could do and should do and possibilities. And I became acutely aware how much I was in my world of my imagination, thinking about all this. And so I made a decision. It wasn't exactly a conscious decision, but it was like, I don't know exactly, but I mean, it was a decisive moment where I decided that I had enough of all these reflections and thinking. It hadn't helped me. I decided that I would start my life over. I'll just start all over again with the next step as I walked. And looking back at it now, 40 years, I don't know if that was naive. Sure. But anyway, I did it. That's what I did. And I just happened to be living in a Zen monastery. That was a kind of a cool place to start all over again, because then the bell rang and I had to go meditate. Bell rang and you got up and went to work or did things. So it was a healthy, very wholesome place to be. And I just then followed what opened up in front of me. And to some degree, that represents the rest of my life. That somehow, that just taking the next step and then seeing what happens and then responding to that and things open up and doing it, eventually, led me here, into what's happening in Redwood City now and the rest of my life. And I'm still doing that, just kind of. And so that was nice for me. That was a nice decision to make. And it turns out that each of us, every day, every moment, comes to that juncture without realizing it. Every day, you kind of start over. Every moment, you kind of start over, believe it or not. You could start over. And the way you start over is that all the things that you did in the past are now in the past. Things you did in the past contribute to this moment. But whatever decisions you made in the past have been made. You don't have to make those again. We find ourselves here and now, And now is when we can decide how to take the next step. Now is the time we decide, given all the conditions that are present here and now we're making a choice to do something. And the choices you made in the past, they are what they are. The place that's really dynamic, the place that's really significant for us in our lives, is the place we are today, and this next step we take, the choice we make today. And the choice we make today of how we walk, how we talk, what we say, what we do, is consequential. And sometimes there are unconscious choices. We're influenced by things around us. But the choices you make have consequences that shape your future. Imagine that there are two identical twins who grew up together, and people couldn't tell them apart. They looked the same, they had the same mannerisms, same way of speaking, the same personalities. They were just all like so similar. But then they decided to go to different colleges when the time came to go to college. And each of them had a different roommate. One of them had a roommate who had a strong tendency to complain. The other had a roommate who had a strong tendency to be grateful for everything. And then they didn't know that it was like, this is what, each one of them thought, this is just what roommates are. They didn't have any reference point to think anything different, but okay, in college you get a roommate, this is what roommates are like. And they didn't, and so slowly they came under the influence of the complaining. One learned to complain, and and one learned to be grateful. It wasn't exactly a choice that it's like a conscious choice, but there was a choice. There was a kind of subconscious choice, like, okay, under the influence of a roommate, it became, like you got reinforced. If you were in the complainer, if you complained, it was like, you had camaraderie-ship. You could, with the one who was grateful, you had the camaraderie-ship by being grateful. So slowly, and the person the twin didn't recognize what was happening, how they were being shaped by the situation. And after a year, you could tell the difference between the two twins easily. And their lives started to change dramatically. The one that started to complain more and more, people kind of held their distance from that person. The one who was grateful, people liked to be with them. Different opportunities opened up. The one who complained because things are a little bit uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable mental state to complain. A stressful mental state. That reinforced certain other inner reactivities. Annoyance at the state of mind, and certain self-criticalness, and made it easier not only to be complaining, but to be angry at things. The person who was grateful supported other mental states, more relaxed states, feeling more of a generosity, and that's what came out. So they both came to the same moment going to college, where they, in a certain way, started their life over. And then things went a different way for each of them. So today is a new day for you. Today is a new beginning. Every moment is a new beginning, and you come to a fork in the road, and the question is, which fork do you take? There's no one who's asking you or telling you, I think, really about what fork you should take moment by moment. But what if you really took it seriously that you're starting your life over today, fresh and new? Because in a way you are. And the way that you are, maybe I'm repeating myself, is that this is really the only place today and now where you can make the choices, engage in the activities that are going to shape your future. If you're going to be kind of the one who shapes your future, to whatever degree we can shape it, it's only you that can do that. Even if you get a roommate who complains, how you respond to that roommate, how you take it in and receive it is really up to you, even if it's subconscious. When we are mindful, we put and have this kind of pause and ability to stay present. We have a much higher sensitivity to notice the choices we make. Higher sensitivity to be wise about which fork we take, the one that's healthy and the one that's unhealthy, the one that creates a better life, creates a kind of worse life for ourselves. And so when we have this mindfulness practice, we can really appreciate, we start over. In that sense, in a certain kind of way, it's very forgiving. Yes, you've been influenced by the mistakes you made in the past. That's part of the conditions that brought you here. But we don't have to be weighed down by the past. Buddhism, the Buddhist approach is to think enough about the past, reflect on it, learn from it, just enough so we can aim to do better in the future. Buddhism, in a way, is forward-looking. So, some people think that Buddhism is all about being in the present moment. It's about being in the present moment. Part of it, the reason to be in the present moment, is so we can, in being forward-looking, we can make the choices today that make a difference for tomorrow, in a good way for ourselves. And even something as simple as complaining, as innocent as it is maybe sometimes, is choosing a fork, which maybe one little complaint is not going to have much impact, but once we start making complaints more and more, it affects our mind states, it affects our habits, it affects how people treat us and relate to us, and it begins creating a new world. So how careful do you want to be in the world that you create for yourself? How you create yourself? There's an expression in English, I don't know if it's an expression, it's not a set phrase, but it goes something like this. If you do X, you own it. You own it. And so I couldn't think of a good example, but if you decide to balance all the teacups in your house on top of each other, and you insist on doing it when someone says, that's not safe, they're going to fall, they're so fragile, they're going to break. And so the person then says, no, I'm going to do it, it's safe. And you say, okay, well, the person walks away. So, okay, well then, whatever happens, you own it. Meaning, I think it means that you're responsible for it. It's up to you to take care of it. It's your karma, some people would say. You own it. Indirectly, directly, the Buddha said that too, 2,500 years ago. He said, you are the owners of your actions. You are the owners of your actions. And then he goes on to say something else. There's a wonderful, almost like a liturgy. He's got a very famous, I think among Buddhists, line about action that I think encapsulated what I'm trying to say today. Beings are owners of their action, heirs to their action. They inherit them. And they originate from their actions. They are bound to their actions. And they have actions as their refuge. So we're owners of our actions, is kind of what I'm saying here. Once we do something, the consequences of that somehow continues for us. So to be careful with what we do, so we, the consequences, the results, the momentum we set in place is one that we want to live by. We inherit our actions, so the heirs of our actions. And so some of the, we receive, again, it's kind of the same idea, but they're passed down to us from one day to the next, through habits, through conditioning, through whatever way that all these different ways, that's infinite ways in which actions kind of carry with them consequences in the future. The idea in Buddhism is that there's no free lunch when it comes to action, or there's no free consequences. All actions carry consequence, and so we inherit them. We inherit the consequences, and then we originate. That's the powerful one. All beings originate from their actions. So if in this way I'm talking about it today, that who you are today is partly the consequence of all the actions you've done in this lifetime before today. And all these things are so subtle and small, and how they come into play and build up over time. I think I was told once that Abraham Lincoln said something like, by the time a person is 40, they're responsible for their face. And I think what he meant was, all the little gestures and all the different ways, expressions we have on the face, build over time a certain kind of face. And I've been impressed. I've seen this sometimes with see people who grew up in different cultures, different countries, and like someone who their parentage was from one country, but they grew up in a different country, and you can see sometimes like the different facial features or muscles or expression, how they are on their face. Maybe it built up differently because of, partly it might just be different muscles are used for when we speak different languages. And as you do that over, decades, it affects the face, but also expressions and all this stuff. So we originate from our actions. And I don't know if that was the best example, but from the Buddhist point of view, it's not about our face, but it's about our hearts, our minds. And so much we're shaped by all the choices we make. And then we are bound to our actions. You can't get away from your actions. You can't get away from the fact that actions are consequential. Even if your action is to do no action, just be a couch potato, do nothing, that's an action too. So, we're bound to actions. We're human beings. That's what we are. We're human. We say we're human beings. I don't think there's very, very little time we spend just being. Sooner or later you have to pee. So we're more like human actors. Is that human activityers? There are these constant activities that we're doing. So to embrace that, to appreciate it, to find a new way to be an actor and activator. I don't know. I'm trying to do something equivalent to being. Because we're bound to action. We can't get away from acting. So let's look at action and activity in a serious way. And then we come to the last part. Beings have action as their refuge. The Buddha said that you can make yourself a refuge. So we're not trapped in action. We're not trapped in creating problems for ourselves by what we do and what we say and how we act. We can act in ways, we can engage in the world and behave in ways that we become our own refuge, our own support. And the refuge in Buddhism is a very powerful word. It's almost like one of the, I don't know, it's kind of like a word like, I don't know if it carries the same, it doesn't carry the same meanings, but maybe the same associations or the same heart feeling or emotion as in other religions. They might talk about having a conversion experience or having a really deep, I'm a devotee of some wonderful religion or something. It has this very deep religious sense of refuge. But rather than the refuge being outside of oneself, the refuge is not exactly in ourselves. It's not like you find some essence inside yourself. Oh, I can, now I've discovered my true self in there. And for the teachings of the Buddha, the refuge is our actions, how we live, what we do. And it makes a huge difference how we live and what we do. And we can do the things that are supportive and nourish us and benefit us. So, simple, it's not so simple maybe, but simple to say. We can live ethically. We can live by the precepts. It makes a big difference, believe it or not, whether you kill people or don't, for your heart. It makes a big difference whether you steal or if you don't. It makes a big difference if you engage in sexual activity that harms others or you don't. It makes a big difference whether you lie or if you don't. It makes a big difference if you engage in intoxication or if you don't. It makes a big difference whether you're greedy or if you're not. Big difference if you have hatred or if you're not. It makes a big difference if you're generous or if you're not. It makes a big difference if you are grateful or if you're complaining. It makes a big difference whether you take the time to see people with respect and even reverence, or maybe the opposite. And these are all actions, these are all behaviors. And choosing the side of the equation that is healthy, we create our own refuge. We create an inner life that we're happy to be in, that we're proud of, that brings us a sense of joy and delight. More importantly, for meditators, it brings us a possibility of relaxation, of ease. We look within, and we don't find conflict. We don't find this is, oh no, I regrets of what I said, or challenged by what I've done. But we look inside and say, oh, it's good in there. Imagine, oh, it's nice to be in there. Who's your best friend? Your own heart, what you find inside. But to discover that, to find that, it's through our actions that we do. Some people feel like they have a lot of doubts and lack of confidence. How do you find confidence? How do you find faith? Some people think it's by reading a lot of books until they find the perfect teaching. Sometimes it's thinking they have to find some state of, meditative state of mind that's going to come out, correct everything. But the way to build confidence is step by step in the actions you do. And it might be that it's just like, after a while you've been practiced honesty for, in small little increments, slowly getting more honest. That after a while you feel that, oh, I think I have confidence. I've learned the skill to communicate honestly in a way that's effective and helpful and safe. But we learn and develop that. We learn to be generous, maybe in small steps, until we feel, oh, I know how to be generous. I know when to be generous and how to be generous, and I know about the world of generosity a bit. And so it's through actions that we develop ourselves, cultivate ourselves. It's by actions that we develop confidence. And faith in Dharma faith in Buddhism is not like faith in Buddhism so much. There might be some of that. But you want to have enough faith in Buddhism that you begin acting in different ways, behaving differently. And then the refuge, the faith, becomes less and less about Buddhism and more about yourself, knowing how to behave and act beautifully. And so the word beauty, when the Buddha talked about action, he talked about, the word here is karma. He sometimes, in English translations, you'll read his teachings, they'll talk about good and bad karma. The word for good, literally, is in Pali, ancient language, is beautiful. There's bad karma, and then there's beautiful karma. What a difference. There's bad behavior, and then there's beautiful behavior. That creates a very different feeling. It doesn't have the moralistic flavor of good karma, I think. And so, what are we creating here? What are we living our life as? What if we say we're doing what's beautiful? Living our beauty, living beauty. And that is more an ethical life, but it doesn't have the heaviness of calling it an ethical life. It has some sense of, maybe for me, some place of freedom and delight and joy. That we're living the joy, we're living the delight of what we want, of what we do. And so the teaching about that's so central to the Buddhism, that it has to do with action, how do we live our life, behave in our life, is not always conveyed for people learning meditation. And it's there's a particular syndrome among a few individuals here in the modern West of being any emphasis on doing and doing something ties them in knots, because they feel like they can't do it right, they're wrong, they have to strain, they have to push, they have to try too hard and get tense, like this is serious, I have to prove myself. All these kind of ideas that weigh down, so much so that if you hear a talk about action, you feel exhausted. Just hearing about it. Oh no, I have to do more. I'm just, that's all I do is do. I just need meditation as a break. So yes, meditation can be a break, and to get that break, some people love meditation teachings, Buddhist teachings, that talk about don't do, just be. It can be very profound to hear the instruction, just be and don't do, as an antidote to all the being and doing and proving that goes on in this culture. But as good as that the teaching is, it doesn't really represent the fullness of what the Buddha had to teach. The Buddha taught about action and how to do it wisely. And one of the ways to do it wisely, as we pay attention, we start learning from the feedback loop when and how our behavior adds stress. How and when our behavior is refreshing and brings ease. We start recognizing the extra attitudes and that we pile on top that make it kind of heavy and difficult, and we start learning other attitudes that our behavior, acting in the world, can be light and easy and fresh, and we don't carry so much at stake. It's just, I'll do this. And I think this is one of the important things to learn, is that as we recognize that actions can be our own refuge, how do we act so that it's not a burden? How do we act? How do we live and behave in the world so that there's ease and it's beautiful? It's something we enjoy to do. So when we finish doing something, we're not exhausted by it, but we feel revived by it. It's possible to do that much more than most people realize. So that means, again, mindfulness, to keep the mindfulness turned on oneself and track carefully the extra attention, the extra stress, the extra straining that goes into what we do, and to learn how to act. The solution is not to avoid acting. The solution is to act without all that extra stuff. When I was at that Zen monastery, there was stories about the founder of it, a Japanese monk named Shinryu Suzuki. He was pretty short. I think maybe he was 5 foot tall or something. And he was in his late 60s, and these young American, strong, tall. He kind of loved having tall American male students to look up at. And one of the things he liked about them was they would come to him and help him with his rock garden. And they had these big boulders. And the stories from those people who worked with him in the garden was that when Suzuki Roshi was going to move a big boulder, he seemed to use no extra effort, more effort than it was needed. His body seemed to stay relaxed, and he knew how to engage, move the boulder without any extra strain. So I wasn't there, so I don't know what they actually saw, but that principle stuck with me. Yes, you can even move boulders without adding extra on top of it. So beings are owners of their actions, heirs of their actions, bound to their actions, originate in their actions, and have actions as their refuge. You have actions as can be your refuge. And it's your choice. Which of those two, whether you make it a refuge or make it something that keeps you bound up and caught and in a certain kind of prison. So those are my thoughts this morning. So we have a few minutes. If any of you want to ask some questions or comments or testimonials about actions or complaints. Or anything else.
It seems to me very hopeful because you get a new chance all the time.
Yes, it's hopeful. You get a new chance all the time. Yes, you do carry with you the effects of the past, but you always can see, okay, now I get to start over. So you don't have to be weighed down by it. Yes.
Well, I do try to do the best I can most all the time. But since I can't guarantee that I will not offend you, because I'm not there in your being, I ask the people around me that if I offend them in any way, please tell me, because then I can look at it maybe and correct my mistake. But if I don't know about it, I can't. So
I think that's really wise. That's really wise. Yes, we have a lot of unconscious behavior and a lot of foolish behavior and all kinds of things we do. And so how do we take that into account? You don't want to be in a straitjacket. And so what you just explained is a really important way of having a community to support us in finding our way. And so to make agreements or arrangements with people you know, or to choose friends who can offer you feedback and places where it's safe to make mistakes and be told about it and find your way forward. This is a really, really useful.
yes, It's difficult for people because people don't want to offend you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would say your names, it would be nice, just so we can all kind of...
Oh, my name's Jeannie.
And I'm Suzanne. I just had the thought that what you were talking about, living with a teenager, you start anew every day. Because now that I'm in there, the teenager's mood changes from day to day, sometimes moment to moment, and you're seeing a new person each day or each moment, and having to learn to flex and change with that and decide you're going to do things differently is probably very good Buddhist practice.
Fantastic, because maybe you'll then learn to do it for yourself, because you probably change more than you realize. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Gil, for explaining actions as a refuge. It was confusing to me when I first saw that statement, but now it's very clear that good actions can become certainly a refuge for going forward.
Great, great. And beautiful actions too. I'm inspired by this idea of calling it beautiful actions rather than good actions. And I don't quite know what to do with it. It's to be honest, but it inspires me quite a bit.
Hi, my name is Abhishek, and can you please explain what's the difference between a good action and a beautiful action?
Can I distinguish between a good action and a beautiful action? The word good, probably both words need defining. We use it so lightly, like we use the word good so easily as if everyone understands what we mean. But I think you can ask, what do you mean by good? I would like to use the word good, that it means that it's useful and beneficial for some purpose. Rather than focusing on the morality of it, its good action is ethical action, which it is for some people, that it's useful, it's healthy, and beneficial for certain things. And whereas beautiful for me is that there is it's certainly pleasant. It's almost like looking at art that it's so nice to see. Someone says something beautiful to another person. It's not just useful, but there's a kind of a grace. There's kind of a pleasure, delight, kind of inspiration. It's kind of wow, that was well done. That was a nice thing. If I don't know if this is, you'll forgive me for being so poor at examples, but if I just said something like, well, thanks for that question. That was great. That was a good question. Thanks. That's one thing, right? But if I say, wow, that was a really great question. That was important. It makes me reflect on it now, and it kind of gives me something to think about even more, that difference. And I hope my answer was good, but thank you. So maybe the first was not so beautiful. Maybe the second approached beauty. Am I in the ballpark for you?
Yes. So it's what I get is like how we do things relates more to beauty, and what we do relates more.
Oh, good. Oh, the beauty has to do with how. Yeah, I like that. Very nice. So I guess, okay. And thank you all very much for coming. And, we used to, when we met before the pandemic, we would often periodically ask people to turn next to each other and say hello and all that. And I feel, a little hesitant to do it now with the pandemic and all that, and how we are with masks and being closely together. But if you go outside in the gravel or under the tree or something, and just maybe some of you would like to say hello to each other, and maybe people you have never met before, and if you're standing in the gravel you're available to say hello to, and maybe chat a little bit. Yes?
And if anyone's new, I'd be happy to, show you around or
So
introduce you to our building and
great.
place.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeannie used to do that before the pandemic. So, yes, so she's offering anybody who's new or relatively new and would like to just say hello to an old timer and hear a little bit about what goes on here. Yeah, go see Jeannie. You'll be outside too, right?
Yep.
Great. Okay.
I'll be in the hall.
Or in the hall, just outside.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you all.